All
right, so we know that at the beginning it's very important to adjust the motivation. So anyway, welcome everyone to the beginning of this session. We know at the beginning is very important to adjust the motivation. And this is something that we stress all the time at the beginning of every session, in every opportunity. The reason for that is because we are practicing Buddhism, and Buddhism is something that is an internal practice that relies on the mind. Buddhism is not about external practices. There are other people who say they are external practices, such as, for example, bathing the body or jumping into the fires or piercing the body with sharp objects or standing on one foot and things like this. They call these austerities. Definitely, they are difficult, hardships for the body, but they call this a path that leads to liberation. We don't agree with this. Our practice is not an external practice. Our practice is internal, and therefore it relies upon the mind. Therefore, for us, for anything to become a practice, to become Dharma, it really depends on the state of our mind. And the only way that we can adjust it is by adjusting the way that we think. And this is why at the beginning, we always say, adjust the motivation, adjust the motivation. Adjust the motivation means make sure you have the right way of thinking. If you adjust your mind correctly, if you're thinking correctly, then there is every chance that every opportunity that whatever you practice, whatever activities you carry out, indeed will become a practice of Dharma. So this is why you hear all the lamas always, whatever the occasion, they say, adjust your motivation, adjust your motivation. And whatever is the occasion, whether it is giving a discourse or giving an initiation, always there is some introduction or some preliminary. And that preliminary is sort of like a Dharma prep talk. And the reason for that, or the purpose for that, is to make sure that we adjust the motivation. Everything depends on the mind. If your mind is good, if it has the right way of thinking, then things will improve. If you have the wrong way of thinking, things will go worse. So we want to adjust the motivation, make things better, to improve things, make sure this becomes a proper practice. Okay, so understanding all this, we will adjust our motivation here by reciting the verse for refuge, Bodhicitta, and then Ganten Lagema. Okay, so last week we started discussing afflicted views. We say that there are 5 types of afflicted views, and we began with the first one, which is the view of the perishable composite. The view of the perishable composite, or this particular type of view, is focusing on your appropriated aggregates and thinking I, me. There are actually 2 types of the view of the perishable. The view of the perishable with regards to I, and the view of the perishable with regards to mine. In mine, meaning that which belongs to me, right? Like my head, my arm, and so forth. Okay, so in any case, this view of the perishable is considered to be an afflicted mind, and it observes, or it holds, that self to be established from its own characteristic, to be truly established. Okay, here we're going to follow the presentation according to the middle way consequent school. The reason why we say this is that for the middle way consequent school, this afflicted view that holds I or mine to be established from its own characteristics, to be truly established, is posited as being the root of all afflictions. So it's posited as being that fundamental ignorance that becomes the cause that brings all other afflictions. So we make the distinction here because there are those who say they are not the same thing. The root ignorance that is the cause for all afflictions is something different. However, the middle way consequence school says is exactly this thing, the view of the perishable, focusing on your appropriated aggregates, considering it to be I or mine, and thinking that it is established from its own characteristics, that it is truly established. In this way, we end up with self-grasping, or grasping at the self of other phenomena, because we say we have the mind. So, for example, you could be saying my head, my arm, my body, my leg, and things like this, okay? So this is not I, this is mine. But again, still you think there is a self of that thing that is established from its own characteristic. So it is very important here to understand this view of the perishable, because the view of the perishable has a certain way of apprehending, of grasping at the self. All right. So that particular self-grasping, grasping at the self in a particular way, is not the usual self that nominally exist. When we say I come, I go, I exist, I'm here, I'm there. It's not that. Okay. It is very important to properly understand what the view of the perishable is grasping at, because all the faults, all the mistakes, all the problems that we have actually stem from that particular self-grasping. So it's important to understand it properly. When we talk about emptiness, the most important thing about emptiness is to properly understand the object of negation. If you miscalculate the object of negation, then you will not be able to have a proper understanding of emptiness. So to understand properly the object of negation, really we must understand what is that type of grasping, what is the self, in what way is the self grasped by this afflicted view. All right, so it is grasping the self to exist from its own side, to be established from its own characteristics, to be truly established. We have many terms to describe it, many ways to describe it. How do all those things say to you? If it says, I'm established from my own side, I'm truly established, I'm established from my own power, I'm established from my own characteristic, they indicate that you exist without relying on anything else. So basically they say that the self exists without relying on the aggregates. So, you know, in colloquial, you say, I stand on my own, right? Or I am independent, I'm autonomous, I am in control, right? So it has this connotation. I am autonomous. I am the one who is in control. I don't rely on anybody else. However, this cannot be further from the truth. We know that the self is something that has to be imputed upon any of the 5 aggregates. It cannot be independent. It does not exist from its own side. Like all other phenomena, it is something which is merely imputed upon the aggregates. Therefore, it has to rely upon those aggregates. It has to rely upon the process of imputation and so forth. So it is a mistake to think that the self exists from its own side, from its own characteristics, from its own power, without depending, without relying on anything else. So, as we say, there is that notion that we have that the self exists, the self that we have exists and does not rely on anything else. So we have this idea that there is a self that is a solid, concrete, something, there is something really there from its own side. This is an innate thought, an innate state of mind, meaning it is there all the time. Although it is present all the time, it's not easy for us to recognize. Actually, it is very difficult for us to recognize. However, there are a couple of opportunities that are good opportunities for us to recognize it, investigate and recognize it. And this is when the mind is extremely happy or when the mind is in great distress, because at that time, this solid I appears more obviously. So we have a better opportunity to search for it and then recognize it and say, here it is. I really think that I have a solid self. So last week, Geshe gave this example of walking along a very narrow ridge. So you have cliff to your right, you have cliff to your left, and the path is extremely narrow. And you're walking along that ridge and you are very frightened. You are aware of how dangerous the situation is. And as you're walking there, you say, oh, I better be very careful because I might fall. I will fall. We're not thinking my body will fall, my head will fall, my leg will fall. We're thinking I will fall. Right, which is very clearly indicates at that point you are thinking there is an I, there is a self that has nothing to do with the aggregates. I will fall, not the aggregates, right? We're thinking I will fall. Okay, so this is an opportunity at times of danger, of fear, or great joy to investigate, to recognize that thing. Otherwise, it's not the usual I when we say I come, I go, in a normal situation. It's not that. Also, the other thing that we mentioned last time is that many people actually think that I am the mind, okay? And we gave this example that, let's say someone were to ask you the question, you have, the state of your mind, right? It is black, it has many faults. And then the state of mind of Venerable Manjushri, totally pure. Would you like to exchange minds? And one would say immediately, we say, yes, let us exchange minds, because if I get that pure mind, I will become totally pure, great knowledge and so forth. And when you have this idea, it indicates that you think that I am the mind. Mind and I are the same. However, this is not true because we talk about my mind. If it is if it belongs to me, it means it is something different to me. This is me and this is the mind, and it becomes my mind, isn't it? We are different. We're not the same. So there are many such misconceptions and mistakes. Yeah. Another example we can see is when other praises or criticizes. Obviously, when others praise us, is like it benefits the mind, and the mind is quite happy. When others criticize us, it harms the mind, and we become hurt, and we become unhappy, isn't it? And then we end up thinking, how could this person say such words about me? They hurt me. They really hurt me. Okay. So at this point, it's very interesting because it seems it's an opportunity to analyze when you are insulted, when you are hurt by the words of others. Again, there is a very strong sense. It is as if there is something which is quite solid and exists within the depths of your mind. All right, because actually you can analyze and say, okay, who is hurt here? Is it my head? Is it my body that is hurt? Is it my mind? Is it my feelings? Who is hurt here? At that point, there is this sensation of an I that is solid and concrete at the depth of your mind, isn't it? But that thing does not exist. So this, as we say, this notion that we get that there is something solid, concrete at the very center, at the very depth of our mind, this exact thing is the view of the perishable composite. This is the grasping of that perishable view. And as we say, this view, the grasping of that view, is the root of all the faults. It is something that all creatures have it, not just humans. Everybody has this, is an innate state of mind, but we are not aware that we have it. And unless we go out of our way to actually investigate, we will not be able to recognize it. We will not be able to understand that we have it. Instead, we will be left with this notion that there is something concrete, sometimes within the body, sometimes within the depth of the mind, and so forth, right? But that thing does not exist. It appears like this, but that thing does not exist. As we say, this type of grasping of the view of the perishable is the root of all afflictions. It will bring about anger, it will bring attachment, it will bring jealousy, it will bring confusion, it will bring many things. So we say that this view of the perishable is present, is an innate mind that is present in all creatures. So even the smallest insects have it, and even the ants, for example, have it. In Liberation in the Palm of Your Hands actually discusses this and brings up the example of the ant. So let's say that you are holding a blade of grass and an ant is walking along the path, and then you kind of like you block its way, or you might even touch it with that blade of grass, or you might put your hand straight away in front of it. At that point, the ant gets such a fright, all right? You might think your hand is nothing, it's very small, but for the ant, it's like you're a giant. And if you're holding a blade of grass, this is almost like a big weapon. So at this point, the ant or the insect stops almost like dead at its tracks, right? Because at this point, it is at the point of shock, thinking, I am dead. This giant has killed me, all right? And then after a while of not moving at all, because it's in a state of shock, it will turn around and move the other direction, move away from us. So it's very interesting. Pabon Rinpoche makes the comment that the reason why it stops and it's almost like as if it's dead, paralyzed, is because at that point it is thinking, I am dead, or it has harmed me. This giant has such a big harm. It's not thinking the giant human has harmed my leg, or has harmed my antenna, or has touched my body. It's thinking it has harmed me, it killed me, I'm dead, right? And then it walks away the other direction. So it shows that everybody has it. So you can see here how important it is to properly understand the object of negation. When we have self-grasping, we must understand in which way is this self-grasped at. Because unless we understand this, we will not be able to negate it. If you don't understand the object of negation, you cannot generate the wisdom realizing selflessness. So you cannot generate the realization of emptiness. Now, it is stressed again and again that in order to have the realization of emptiness, before you have the realization, the most important thing is to accurately and properly recognize the object of negation. They say that without accurately or properly understanding what is the object of negation is like shooting arrows, but you don't know where the target is. If you don't know where the target is, it doesn't matter how many arrows you are shooting. Chances are you are not going to hit that target, isn't it? So unless you understand the misapprehension, the wrong grasping of the self, you cannot negate it. So if you cannot negate it, you're never going to generate that wisdom realizing emptiness. But the thing is that if you don't negate it, we say that that thing is the root of all afflictions. So afflictions will keep generating, which means we will remain within cyclic existence. And all these problems and difficulties and dissatisfaction will just continue. Therefore, it is very important to generate the wisdom realizing emptiness. But before you generate the wisdom realizing emptiness, the most important thing is to recognize properly the object of negation. Okay, so another example that is given is the information that we need in order to arrest a thief. So you have a thief and you want to arrest, you want to stop. But you would not be able to arrest the thief unless you can identify that person. So we need to have a description. Who is the thief? All right. So if you give it a description that says the thief was a human wearing white clothes, I mean, okay, it's giving you some information. It's a human, and it's wearing white clothes. But actually, there are many people around on a particular day wearing white. So it is too broad, right? It is not narrow enough. It is not specific enough to allow you to arrest the right person. So you cannot properly identify the person. It means you cannot stop it. You cannot arrest the thief. So it's exactly like this with the object of negation. It cannot be too broad, because if it is too broad, you will not be able to properly negate, to stop what needs to be negated. So what happens here is we need to have a particular type of mind. We generate that wisdom of selflessness, but it is very precise in order to harm this self-grasping. If otherwise, it will not be able to harm self-grasping. To harm self-grasping, you must generate a mind that is apprehending the self in the exact opposite manner. So it will become its direct opposite. And this is how it will harm it. Otherwise, it cannot harm it. So if you cannot properly identify it, you cannot harm it. If you cannot harm it, it means you cannot generate the wisdom realizing selflessness. It means you don't realize emptiness. It means you're not getting rid of that thing. So all the afflictions keep generated and we keep remaining in samsara. So up to now, all of those lives that we have experienced so much trouble and suffering. And if we don't do anything about it, we will continue. Our next life and the other lives will be like this. So we have different expressions here where we say it is not truly existent. Or we say it is not inherently established, or we say it is not established from its own side. So when we hear those expressions, we have to examine, we have to analyze when we say it is not truly existent. So what does it mean to be truly existent? What is the meaning of the word truly in this sentence? Because we are negating that thing, right? So we need to understand what we are negating here. It's all about understanding the object of negation. When we say it is not inherently established, what does it mean to be inherently established? When we say it is not established from its own side, what does it mean to exist from its own side? So let me understand this first, and then I will negate it. I will understand what it means to negate it. Okay. So in the commentary to the 400 stanzas, there is a verse that says, so how do we posit the self? All right, what is this idea of the self? Having the nature of not relying on others is inherent existence. Not having this is selfless. Okay, so it explains to you, all right, if you have this idea that the self has a nature of not relying on others, this is exactly the meaning of inherent existence. When we say something exists inherently, it means it exists without relying on others. All right. So if you go now and negate this, if you go into the opposite, lacking this, the opposite of this is selfless. So this is emptiness. Okay. So when we use the term emptiness, you understand that it is empty of something. Empty of something means something is lacking. It is not that. If it is lacking this, it is not this. Whatever is missing, it's not this, right? So, for example, we say the vase is empty of a pillar. When you say a vase is empty of a pillar, you're saying, basically, you say a vase is not a pillar. There's no pillar here, right? The vase is the vase. It's not the pillar. Okay. So here we say that to have a nature that does not rely on others is inherent existence. So not having that nature, meaning you have a nature that relies on others. This is exactly what emptiness is. Emptiness is the lack of not relying on others. Emptiness means you do rely on others, right? So come to understand in this way correctly what is the meaning of emptiness, what you are negating. Otherwise, people have a lot of misconceptions about emptiness. So they say the vase is not here. This is what emptiness is. No. Or they say the house is empty. This is what emptiness is. No, that's not what emptiness is. Okay, so we continue with the commentary on this issue, explaining what is the idea of something that does not rely on others. The unreliant and the non-dependent is that which does not rely on others. It's something that can stand on its own, from its own, on its own right. So it's like autonomous, solid and autonomous. So when we use this expression in colloquial, we say sometimes, you know, this person is solid. You can just put them there and they can operate on their own. So you just put them there and they can do the job on their own, or leave them there, they will do the study on their own, okay? So do you get this idea of not needing to rely on others? So this is the idea of not relying on others. Not relying on others means you don't rely on anything else. You don't rely on causes. You don't rely on conditions. So when you grasp, when you apprehend things, especially the self, to exist in this way, so basically you are grasping at their inherent existence, or you're grasping at them to exist truly. So in terms of recognizing the object of negation, it says is not enough to recognize the object of negation by relying on the words and the description of others. So other people would describe to you what the object of negation is, but that doesn't mean that you have understood the object of negation. You have recognized the object of negation. Instead, you must analyze personally yourself, and through your own experience, identify it. You should be hands-on. So, you know, when you touch something with your hand, you put your hand into something, you know you are holding that thing yourself. So this is from your own direct experience. You have analyzed, you have reached, you have found that object of negation, and you are hands-on. You don't rely on some generic words, some generic description that comes from somebody else. It is very important to recognize the object of negation, because when in order to understand emptiness, you have to understand that the object, whether it is the vase, the pillar, myself, whatever is the object is empty of that object of negation. The object of negation is to be negated, is to be removed from the picture. You have to understand that the vase is empty of the object of negation, meaning the vase, it does not inherently exist, the vase does not truly exist, the vase is not established from its own side, independently, without relying on anything else. And you have to understand it in relation to all phenomena. Myself, I don't exist this way. The vase does not exist this way. The pillar does not exist this way. Otherwise, to say the vase is empty of water, that's not leading you to an understanding of emptiness. That is not understanding of emptiness. Understanding of emptiness relies on being able to negate the object of negation. So it is like this, we have this idea that it exists, it's something which is solid, it exists inherently, exists truly, exists from its own side, exists from its own characteristics, exists without relying on other things, right? But these are exactly the things that we need to negate, the things that we need to remove. So whatever is the basis of your investigation, so let's say you are investigating the person, you have to negate, to say, no, it does not exist from its own side, does not exist from its own characteristic. It is empty of existing from its own characteristics. Basically, it is empty of that object of negation. You have to understand that you need to, okay, I thought it existed in this way, but actually it doesn't. So take this out of the picture. So, and the way that we do this is by thinking, it cannot exist in this way because it must rely upon other things. Here we have this whole process where the mind is imputing person upon a basis of designation, the aggregates and so forth. So how can I say that it is independent, that it exists from its own side? Okay, so when we say we have realization of emptiness, we understand that it is empty of the object of negation. And this is why emptiness is said to be a non-affirming negation. You're just negating something, you're taking something out. Okay, so Geshe says it's difficult, emptiness is difficult. It's not that I fully understand it, but that's how. So it is very important to understand properly the object of negation. If you don't understand the object of negation, it doesn't matter which type of reasoning you engage, because we have different reasoning that we can follow to understand emptiness. It doesn't matter which line of reasoning you follow, it will be of no benefit. Actually, it can cause even more harm. So to give you an example, we know that conventionally the vase exists. This is deep in it's from our experience. You can see the vase, and deep within your mind, you know that conventionally that vase exists. Okay, so now you engage in some analysis, and mentally you dissect these vase, and you say, for example, the lip of the vase where you're pouring, right, is not the vase. The belly of the vase is not the vase. The bottom, the flat bottom of the vase is not the vase. The handle of the vase is not the vase. So you go like this, mentally, you go through each of the parts of the vase and you say, that's not the vase, and that's not the vase, that's not the vase. At the end, you say, there is no vase. When you reach that conclusion, it's like you lose the vase, okay? But this is not realization of emptiness. This is actually the mistake of turning dependent origination into a reasoning that leads you to severing the continuum. Just as you do it with, we will explain the term. Okay, so just as you do this with the vase, you analyze and you say, that's not the vase, that's not the vase, that's not the vase. At the end, there is no vase and you lose the vase. You will do the same thing with a person. So at the end, you will say, there is no person. So you're going to lose the person. Once you lose the person, you say, I don't exist, the person does not exist. Basically, you're saying that you are severing the continuum of the person. So who's going to go into the next life? So next thing, you're going to be negating the existence of the next life. If there's no person, no one is, it takes rebirth, right? So there will be no next life. If there's no next life, the next thing is there is no law of cause and effect. So you are losing that as well. So this is how wrong it can go. You are severing the continuum. So what we have been describing here, performing this sort of analysis that leads you to think there's no vase or there's no person, I lost the vase, I lost the person. This is not emptiness. So how are we to understand emptiness? Emptiness is always, when you're working with emptiness, you must have a basis. And then you're going to negate something in relation to that basis. So whatever is your basis, it could be the vase, it could be the pillar, it could be the person, it doesn't matter. Okay, so you have a basis. You cannot lose the basis. That's why we say don't get it wrong, because if you get it wrong, there's no vase, there's no person. That's not it. You need to have a basis. Okay, so you have a basis. Then at the beginning of the session, we explained what is the object of negation. What is the object of negation? It exists from its own side. It exists truly. It exists inherently. It is solid. It does not exist without relying on anything else. All right. All of those things, any of those things, is the object of negation. So now say, whatever is my basis, the vase or the person or the pillar, whatever, it is empty of the object of negation. It is not that, does not exist in this way. So this is emptiness. Emptiness is always in relation to the basis, right? So you understand that a particular basis is empty of the object of negation, which is all those points that we have given, all right? So this is if you don't go this way, you would not be able to realize emptiness, to understand what emptiness is all about. Okay, so if you do we mentioned doing this analysis where we say the lip of the vase is not the vase, the belly of the vase is not the vase, the bottom of the vase is not the vase. Okay, this is a type of analysis that we must do in order to understand that the vase is something which is merely imputed by the mind. So you understand that the vase is merely imputed by the mind. The vase exists. You must always start from the point that your basis exists. If you come to the point to say it doesn't exist, I've lost the vase, I've lost the person, right? Then you cannot negate anything in relation to it. Just saying I lost the person or I lost the vase, this is not emptiness. You will not understand emptiness like this. And actually, when you lose the vase or when you lose the person, there is quite a lot of fear there, right? There's a sense of fear. Okay, but this is to understand that it is merely imputed by the mind. And then negate, take out the object of negation. So we use the term emptiness, like, emptiness is very important, emptiness is very precious, we must realize emptiness. Emptiness, the term indicates it is empty of something. What is it empty of? It is empty of the object of negation. So you understand here how important it is to properly recognize the object of negation. The object of negation cannot be nilly-willy. The object of negation is something which is very precise. You have to identify it very precisely because you will be saying it doesn't have this and this property, right? So you saw at the beginning of this session, we spent a lot of time trying to explain, trying to precisely recognize what is that object of negation. Once you understand that object of negation, you apply it to any basis. Whatever is the basis, is the vase, is it the pillar, is it the person, whatever. You just apply that object of negation to whatever is the basis. As the Heart Sutra says, form is emptiness. Emptiness is form. What does form is emptiness means? It means apply that object of negation to any type of form. You can apply it. It is empty of that object of negation, and this is the emptiness of that basis. So Geshe was saying, even if you're at this state of doubt, but you don't have absolute certainty, you're in the state of doubt, you're saying, oh, most probably this is what it refers to. Most probably this is what Geshe was talking about. So even having this level of doubt in terms of emptiness is extremely valuable, if extremely good. There is that verse that says, those who lack merit do not even generate doubt. Those who generate doubt shred to pieces cyclic existence. So those who do not have merit will not even entertain, will not even any doubt. We're saying, oh, probably emptiness is like this. I'm not sure. It might be like this. It might be like that. At least they entertain the doubt. If you have some merit, at least you will entertain the doubt about emptiness. And if you have doubt, meaning if you have thoughts about emptiness, it shreds samsara. So the verb that is used there is like, when you have a piece of cloth and you take a sharp object and you make holes into it, so it's not solid anymore. You weaken it by a great degree. So today, having doubt about emptiness is excellent. So today you generated some new doubt, and if you don't leave it at that, it will be very good. So if you keep analyzing, if you keep engaging that object, you will be able to refine it. It will get better and better. It will get deeper. Your understanding will get deeper. And this is how you will come to the point of generating the realization of emptiness, right? Once you have the realization of emptiness, you will find this is the only way to break yourself free from cyclic existence. Without that realization of emptiness, there is no way to become free of cyclic existence. You are deprived of the means of freedom from cyclic existence. So there's no other way. All right, so that was the first one of the 5 types of afflicted view, the view of the perishable composite. It is hard. Let's move to the second one, which is extreme view. All right, so extreme view is that the self, which self? The self that you were grasping to be the same with the aggregates, not different, not imputed, independent, blah, 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 the things. Okay, so that grasped self, you see it as being permanent or annihilated. Okay, so permanent here means that you have this idea of the self that is extremely stable, permanent, eternal, nothing will change. Or the other view that says annihilated means the continuum is severed. When you say that the continuum of the self is severed, of an individual is severed, it means there will be no next life. We say that a lot of non-Buddhists have any of these two ideas, the permanent or the annihilated, or the severing of the continuum of the individual. And this is why there is so much grief at the time of death, because there is this idea that everything finishes. It's all over. There's nothing. There's no taking of another life. And then you see people in the cemeteries taking flowers in the cemeteries and crying inconsolably. Why there is so much suffering? There is so much suffering because they say there will be no next life. We are not like this. We believe that the continuum is not severed. We believe that there will be another next life. It could be a good life. It could be average life. It could be bad life. So being aware that there is continuation, even at the very last moment, at the time of death, we're thinking, what can I do? Maybe I can recite some mani mantras. It will help towards my next rebirth. All right. So our attitude is different. Okay, so you see here, it is called extreme views or extreme view. We need to understand the etymology. So when you talk about extremes, you talk about two endpoints. So between the two endpoints, what do you have? You have the middle point. So what are the two extremes? One extreme is the extreme of permanence, and the other is the extreme of nihilism. Both of them are great faults. You don't want to be with such extreme views. So this is how we define the middle. The middle and the middle path is the path that is free from the two extremes. So we have the middle view, which is the view of emptiness.
Yeah.
All right, so we'll continue with number 3. The third wrong view is clinging to those views as supreme. So here you're clinging on some bad views. We have already mentioned 3 of those bad views. We mentioned the views of the perishable collection. We mentioned the view of the permanence and the view of nihilism. So clinging to those bad views, thinking they are supreme. They are the best. So clinging to views as supreme, as we say, you're clinging to bad views, thinking they are supreme. There are different types of views that you might be clinging to. One, as we mentioned, is the view of the perishable collection, but we know that we have 2 on this, I and mine, all right? Then it is clinging to extreme views. And again, in extreme views, we have 2. We have permanence and nihilism, and also clinging at wrong views. We haven't done wrong views yet. It is coming later on. So clinging to any of those 3, and they are subdivisions, and thinking they are supreme is what is indicated here. Number 4 is clinging to rules and ritual as supreme. So here, rules and ritual refer to different types of discipline that, you know, according to the time or the place, they consider to be the right thing. So rules refer to specific types of discipline, and rituals here, they are different physical and verbal and even mental behavior, conduct that you follow. So it refers to, you know, practices that non-Buddhists used to observe, such as we mentioned, standing on one leg for very long months and months, or jumping into a pit of fire, or setting your hands in fire, or piercing your body, causing the body to bleed, and so forth. So they used to think that this is a ritual and it is supreme, you know, it's a very good thing to do. So actually those things that we describe, they were quite prominent in India. They still are, especially in South India, in Tamil Nadu, in Karnataka state. There is this place that is associated with Master Shantideva, the Kanika. Geshe says, I think, is mentioned in Bodhisattva's Ways of Life by Master Shantideva, the practitioners of, or the yogis of Kanika. And Geshe says, I think it's Karnataka state in India, in South India. So you see them, for example, holding one arm standing, holding one arm raised. It's not supported by anything for years like this. But, you know, this causes all the nerves and the blood circulation is totally goes to waste. Okay. Or they are standing on one foot and the other foot is bent and elevated. So again, all the nerves, all the circulation in the foot, they go to waste. So the foot goes to waste. Okay, the whole leg actually goes to waste. But for them, they're practicing austerities for the sake of Dharma. So for them, it is a Dharma practice. Yeah. All right, so we'll come to the last one, which is wrong view. So wrong view Okay, so there are different ways. It is slightly different, described in different texts. It is an afflicted view in terms of the non-existence of past and future lives, the law of cause and effect, and so forth. In Lam Rim, it describes it as repudiating past and future lives and the law of cause and effect. So repudiate here, it means to negate the existence of something that actually exists. So it exists, but you say, no, it doesn't exist. So past and future lives, you believe that they don't exist. And actually, if you don't believe that they are past and future lives, there is no reason to act ethically. There is no reason to be aware of the law of cause and effect. And therefore, law of cause and effect becomes irrelevant. And before long, you say the law of cause and effect does not exist. There are many different views here in terms of wrong views. So another type of wrong view is not just to repudiate the existence of past and future lives, law of cause and effect, but to say that the great gods, such as Ishvara, or the principle that is accepted by the enumerators, are the cause for everything in samsara. So there are those who believe that there is a God creator, such as, for example, Ishvara. He created everything in samsara, or the enumerators believe the principle is the one who did this, created everything, like all the animals, I don't know, the pigs and the buffaloes and the cows and everything that exists in samsara. So that's again a wrong view. All right, so here in terms of wrong views, we have 4 types of wrong views. Repudiating, the first one is repudiating cause, the second one repudiating results, the third one repudiating kindness, and the fourth one repudiating existing entities. Okay, so the first one, repudiating cause, it means you say that there's no such thing as good or bad behavior. It doesn't matter how I behave, because it will not become the cause that will bring about any result. It's not acting as a cause. So there's no issue with good or bad activities. The second one, repudiating the results, is to say that the maturational result of practicing virtue is not happiness. That thing does not exist. Or the maturational result that comes from non-virtue is suffering. No, that doesn't exist. Okay, repudiating result. The third one, repudiating kindness, is repudiating or refuting the idea that, for example, your parents, your relatives, and so forth raised you with kindness or acted with you through kindness, or society supports you, and so forth. Okay, the last one, repudiating existent entities, is to say that obtaining the state of an arhat by abandoning afflictions and faults and so forth does not exist. So you can see here that the many different types of wrong views, and they act to destroy your root of virtue. So this is something that we also saw in terms of anger. Anger also acts in a way of destroying your root of virtue. So here, wrong views also do that. We say there are many types of wrong views, but the biggest, in the sense the worst amongst them, are the wrong views that repudiate or deny the existence of the law of cause and effect and past and future lives. This definitely destroys all your root of virtue. So we have looked today, we have completed this section of afflicted views. We know that there are 5 of them. And these 5, they fall in either of 2 categories. They are either exaggerating or repudiating. To exaggerate here means you make up, meaning something that does not exist, you say that it exists. To repudiate is the opposite. Something that exists, you deny it. You say it does not exist. If we look at the etymology of exaggeration, right? We translate it as exaggerate in English. In Tibetan, it means apply feathers. Okay, so apply feathers. You know, when the arrow, right? What is the arrow made of? The arrow is a stick, and then you have the feathers of a bird, right? That you put at an angle at the bottom end of it, isn't it? So initially there are no feathers. Okay, so what you do is you elaborate by inserting the feathers. So this is what happens with the exaggeration. It's not there, but you say, oh no, it is, and it's like this. All right, so we see here we have the wrong views, and as we say, they are very important in terms they are severe because they keep us within samsara, they destroy our root of virtue, and so on and so forth. And when we look at this classification here, we gave a 5-fold classification. However, there are many ways to classify them, and if you look at more extensive presentation in the text, you will find a list of 20 wrong views, and so on and so forth. Unless we follow those texts, it's difficult to go through the list of 20 and other such alternative classifications. Another thing that we need to mention here is the 14 unspecified views. Okay, so those 14 unspecified views are basically questions that were posed to the Buddha by non-Buddhists, and the Buddha did not specify, is it this or is it that? So in other words, the Buddha remained silent. He didn't give an answer. So to give you an example of this, non-Buddhists came and asked the Buddha, does the world have a beginning and an end? Okay, so in our belief, there is the word samsara is beginningless, isn't it? So, however, they believe that there is a beginning to the world because they believe that at some point Ishvara created the world. So if the Buddha were to say to them, there is no beginning to the world, that would be a great shock to them. That would really harm them greatly. Then again, if to avoid harming them or upsetting them or shocking them, if the Buddha were to say yes, that would be a lie, right? So the Buddha decided to remain silent. He didn't specify. Also, there were some questions of, is this virtue or is this non-virtue? Of course, we have very clear delineation between what is virtue and what is non-virtue in Buddhism. But if you don't, at times, we don't specify it, and it remains unspecified for this reason. Now, the fact that we have 14 unspecified views, it means the Buddha didn't say it is this or it is that, but remained silent on these topics, is a further proof that the Buddha was fully omniscient. Okay, so it's not that he didn't know what answer to give. He was fully omniscient of how it would affect those who will receive this answer. Okay, so we don't need to say more about the 14 unspecified views. So you can see those 5 afflicted views, they can be very detrimental. So at least now that we have come to know them, we should make an effort not to allow them to enter our minds, not to generate them. Because if they do enter within our minds, and if we harbor such afflicted wrong views, they lead us to wrong, mistaken paths. And once we enter those things that are not true paths, it's very difficult to generate virtue. So basically it becomes an obstacle for us to generate virtue, to increase our virtue, and so forth. So it is very good that we make the prayer and we say, may those 5 afflicted views never enter my mind. And if we pray like this, there is the chance that we reinforce the thing that we don't want to be associated with these views. So there is the chance that we generate the correct views and that we progress and we reach Buddhahood. All right. So Geshe says, I would like to stop here for today.